What if I told you there was once a king so physically deformed that his own people believed he was cursed by the devil himself? That king was Charles II of Spain, a monarch whose appearance was so disturbing that even the people closest to him whispered he must be bewitched. They actually called him El Hechizado, the bewitched one. But here's the unsettling truth. Charles wasn't cursed by demons or dark magic. His curse was far more real. He was cursed by his own royal bloodline. This is the story of how Europe's most powerful dynasty destroyed itself from the inside out, producing a king whose body was so disfigured that when he finally died, the autopsy revealed horrors that seemed to confirm every dark rumor whispered about him for decades. Let us begin with one of the most disturbing physical traits he had: a jaw that literally couldn't T-close. Foreign ambassadors meeting him for the first time were stunned. Here was the king of the mighty Spanish Empire, and he couldn't even shut his mouth. His lower jaw jutted so far forward that his lips never met. His mouth just hung open, slack and useless, like a broken hinge. This wasn't some random birth defect. It was the inevitable result of something far worse: centuries of inbreeding within the Habsburg dynasty, all in the name of keeping the bloodline pure. The Habsburgs had one rule: marry family, keep the power in the family. Cousins married cousins. Uncles married nieces. Some family trees looked more like tangled spiderwebs than anything resembling a lineage. In Charles's case, his parents were uncle and niece. Both sets of his grandparents, it's also uncle and niece. You go far enough back, and his genetic diversity was about the same as someone whose family had been stranded, alone on an island for generations. This inbreeding led to something doctors now call mandibular prognathism, but most people simply called it the Habsburg jaw. His teeth didn't align. His top row sat entirely behind the bottom. Chewing was basically impossible. So every meal became a humiliating, miserable event. His food had to be pureed, like baby food, soups and mush. Still, it would drip from the corners of his mouth. Solid food, it would just fall out. At royal dinners, servants had to constantly wipe drool from the king's chin, while nobles looked on in silence, and it didn't stop there. His speech was nearly incomprehensible, a slurred, wet mumble no one could follow. Even his own courtiers struggled to make sense of him. Not because of language, because of his deformity. Palace records even reveal that his own mother, Queen Mariana, lived in constant fear that Charles would choke to death in his sleep, on his own tongue. But the Habsburgs didn't stop the inbreeding. They saw what was happening. But power meant more than the suffering of their own children. By the time Charles was born, he was no longer just a man. He was an experiment in just how badly human genetics can break down, and the jaw was just the beginning. His whole body was a disaster. Charles II, ruler of Spain, looked like a child who had been stretched and twisted by some cruel joke of nature. He stood barely 5 feet tall. His limbs were spindly and skeletal. His head was so oversized it seemed to loll on a neck too weak to hold it upright. He didn't even learn to walk until he was 8 years old. Most kids take their first steps around 1. Charles took 8 years. Even after that, he didn't walk like others. He stumbled, shuffled, used furniture to keep his balance like an elderly man in a child's body. His spine was so curved that he appeared permanently hunched, like he was carrying the burden of generations of genetic decay. And maybe he was. Mentally, things were just as bad. Charles had the mind of a child well into adulthood. He couldn't read until the age of 10, and even then, he barely understood what he was reading. His tutors described him as a broken cup. They'd pour in knowledge, but nothing stayed. His emotions were equally unstable. He threw tantrums over minor issues, screaming, thrashing, like a toddler who'd been denied a toy. Other times, he'd sit in silence for hours, completely unresponsive, staring at nothing. His hair, it fell out in patches, leaving his scalp mottled like diseased leather. Court painters tried to soften his image in portraits, but even they couldn't completely hide what was obvious. Charles was falling apart, inside and out, and it only got worse with time. While most people reach adulthood and stabilize, Charles deteriorated faster than his doctors could understand. His body was shutting down, and they had no idea why. But that wasn't even the worst part. As King Charles was expected to continue the royal line, but he couldn't. He married twice. His first wife, Marie Louise of Orleans, was a vibrant, hopeful young woman when she arrived in Spain. But on their wedding night, things went horribly wrong. Servants said she left the bedroom crying. Charles was confused and distressed. The reality was heartbreaking. Charles's body hadn't matured sexually. His reproductive organs were so underdeveloped, doctors later said they resembled those of a child. But the court wouldn't admit this. Instead, they blamed Marie Louise for being barren, putting her through humiliating procedures, treatments, and relentless pressure. She died young at 26. Some historians believe the stress, the medications, and the trauma may have slowly poisoned her. Charles married again to Maria Anna of Neuburg, but by then, he was deteriorating rapidly. She, too, was horrified by his condition. The court brought in every doctor they could find, scoured ancient texts, even tried magic. Nothing worked, because the problem wasn't physical, it was genetic. And across Europe, rival powers were watching, waiting. Everyone knew that if Charles died without an heir, the Spanish throne would be up for grabs. A war was coming, and it would be devastating. And then, when science failed, the court turned to something darker. They called in exorcists. Public exorcisms were held in the palace. Priests screamed Latin prayers over the king as he writhed on the floor, foaming at the mouth, drenched in holy water mixed with ground-up relics. Sometimes he vomited. Sometimes he passed out. The court believed that demons were real, and Charles believed it too. When priests claimed they expelled 47 demons from his body, Charles actually showed signs of improvement. Not because it worked, but because he was that desperate to believe. And when he finally died at 38, what doctors found inside him confirmed every nightmare. His autopsy was so disturbing the report was almost hidden. His heart was the size of a walnut, shriveled, blackened. His lungs were rotted, his intestines putrefied, his reproductive organs barely formed, and his brain surrounded by fluid and discolored, as if it had been slowly shutting down for years. One royal physician wrote that Charles's body didn't have a single healthy organ, not one. And yet, he lived for 38 years. Barely, a walking, breathing miracle of biological collapse. When he died, just as feared, Europe plunged into the War of Spanish Succession. A brutal, decade-long war that left hundreds of thousands dead. All because a royal family chased power and ignored nature. Charles, too, wasn't cursed by demons. He was cursed by his dynasty, by the very people who were supposed to protect him. His life became proof that even kings can't escape the consequences of blood. If this kind of dark royal history fascinates you, hit the like button and let me know what other mysteries you'd like me to dig into next. There's more where this came from.